There are a lot of different ways that I could have approached this character analysis for Colin, but I wanted to distill it down into three main topics of conversation. I'll go into depth with each of these, but the first category is the characteristics and archetypes that Colin fulfills. Him being the younger brother comes with the perception that he's more innocent, more naive, less experienced. Deep down, he's the epitome of a lover boy. He is a hopeless romantic, he's extremely optimistic, and all of this makes sense for him being a writer as well. His youth also lends credence to the idea that he is the cheeky, charming, light-hearted sibling of the bunch. Alongside all of this comes his more empathetic qualities. He's sensitive, he's a people pleaser. The next category is his behavioral patterns throughout the 3 seasons. He has an extremely evident hero complex. He also struggles with an inferiority complex. He often defies societal conventions and doesn't conform to a lot of social norms. And lastly, we'll discuss some of the recurring themes that come up throughout Colin's arc. This includes his search for a greater purpose and meaning in life, his desire for deeper connection, his insecurity that's manifested from the lack of respect he's paid from those around him, his belief that he needs to do something to earn love, and his overall journey to self-acceptance. So for his season 1 character arc, he starts as a cheeky, charming boy who gets caught up in romanticizing an idea of a life or a woman. His naivete and immaturity is utilized to take advantage of and dupe him, which leaves him humiliated, especially because everybody else saw it coming but him. At the end of the season, he decides to cope with this by taking off and going on an adventure. In his season 2 character arc, he's haunted and depressed about the situation that unfolded in season 1. His travels didn't help rid him of this pain, so he's effectively dwelling on and living in the past. He begins to feel a lack of purpose in comparison to others around him, and he's searching desperately for it by the end of season 2. For his character arc in season 3, he's returning with newfound but totally insincere confidence and swagger, trying to behave the way that he has been taught to behave in society, and reaping more surface-level rewards, which still leaves him unfulfilled at the end of the day. This leads him to realizing what he truly wants and embracing who he truly is by the end of part 1. The first quality of Colin's I want to address throughout the seasons is his romantic nature. He has a love-at-first-sight-like reaction with Marina, which directly mirrors the scene that precedes it, where Penn is looking at him in a very romanticized light. The shot composition and the positioning of those scenes so close together emphasizes this, establishing that he, too, is a romantic sort of person. We see multiple instances which prove that Colin isn't coy or constrained when it comes to pursuing what he wants in the romantic sphere. It's also interesting to note that in all of season 1, Colin, despite being the youngest of the 3 elder brothers, is the only brother seen participating in courtship whatsoever. In a conversation between Marina and Penn about Colin, he's described as being
not like the other young men who play games and guard their affections.
This is an explicit acknowledgement not only of this quality of Colin's, but also that this is unique within this society.
He is eager.
We see later he's giddy to propose. He refers to a long engagement as
simply romantic,
while grinning ear to ear. He waxes poetic about how she deserves a grand wedding, considering that their families will need time to plan. These aren't the kinds of things that a lot of men, especially during this time, are cognizant of, which yet again sets Colin apart. In episode 6, he cements himself as a man of grand romantic gestures as he wants to make a huge public declaration announcing his engagement to Marina. When confronted about the engagement and the reasoning behind it, Colin is almost incredulous at Antony's implications about compromisation.
You compromise this young lady? Certainly not.
He poses the question,
why does anyone marry, brother?
As though there's only one valid answer to the question, because to him, there is. He says as much moments later when he says,
love, of course.
Of course, being operative in communicating how essential this is to his understanding of life. He doesn't identify with or even recognize an alternative motivation because to him, love is the only answer. He also calls out Antony's avoidance when saying,
it is not my fault, nor Marina's, that you cannot fathom true attachment.
Yet again, directly acknowledging that Colin's approach to romantic interactions is very different than the rest of the men in the Ton, Antony included. In episode 7, he is quite literally reciting original poetry.
But my heart pays no heed to mere logic. When I think of her, I only want to be near her, to be with her.
And Greek mythological tales about grand gestures of love and romance.
Leander swam Abydos to Sestos every single night in complete darkness, just to see his love.
In season 2, his determination to swear off love and romance at the beginning is only further proof of how large a space that occupied in his heart and mind throughout season 1. At the end of episode 3, Colin's completely unprompted mention of Marina gives insight into the fact that he's been in anguish over this in the off-screen interim. He has a great line which encapsulates this when he says,
funny how distance is no match for memory.
He pursued this journey in the hopes that he could banish this sensibility, only to be plagued by it the entire time he was away and even after he's returned. His decision to visit Marina in the first place demonstrates his being consumed by these thoughts and feelings, and he explicitly states as much when he says,
Throughout my travels, I kept pondering how I left things between us.
this is something that's weighed heavily on him, and he has been unable to escape. As Marina points out, though, these are fantasies that he's caught up in. He's so consumed by the idea of what could have been that he's unable to see what is in front of him or what could be. This, of course, has a lot less to do with Marina specifically, which I'll discuss in depth later, but this just demonstrates that Colin is still a romantic, despite how much he's tried to excommunicate that part of himself and swearing off love and romance. It's interesting because while in season 3 it may seem that he's more active in his pursuit of romance, it's all very detached. Every flirtatious or even sexual interaction that he has is with multiple women at once. It is, by definition, impersonal. It lacks intimacy and connection. Eloise's reference to his being lonely is important to note here, as it obviously struck a chord with him. Loneliness as a concept is brought up many times in reference to Colin throughout the seasons, and again sets up the idea that Colin craves connection. His response to Antony's congratulating him about his many admirers is another instance where the facade is beginning to slip.
You are invited here to congratulate on your many new admirers.
It's clear that this kind of surface-level material success in the romantic or sexual sphere is unfulfilling for Colin.
I'm not certain that that should cheer me.
Not only does it not cheer him, but he is unsure about how or why it even should in the first place, despite the fact that he is playing the part. In episode 2, the fact that Colin vividly remembers and can recall every detail of his and Penn's first meeting tells you how much of a romantic he is, even in the nostalgic sense.
I was riding my horse, minding my own business, when I was assaulted by a devilishly yellow head covering.
His qualities of being a writer and storyteller are also evident by this. Similarly, the level of orchestration he engineers to craft a scenario in which Penn can be comfortable shows his attention to detail, his capability for imagination, as well as his willingness to take grand actions in aid of a larger goal. This is a romantic gesture in everything but name. In the transcript from his journal, Colin's main point of contention for this entire season is explicitly stated when he says,
I marvel at how one can feel such intimacy, but also such great distance.
This is the crux of the issue for Colin. Despite being active in the pursuit of romance, or perhaps more accurately sexual connection, he's found that for him personally, there's still a great chasm. He's still yearning for a deeper sense of meaning and connection, striving for an intimacy that he's been unable to find regardless of how many women he's pursued. At the end of episode 2, this is where things really start to click for Colin, because for the first time in his life, it makes sense to him. This connection, this intimacy, is what he's been wanting desperately and searching for to no avail. Luke Newton's facial expressions in the scene convey this very keenly. He's completely confounded to be finding what he's always been looking for in this kiss, and you see the shift in his demeanor as he walks away. If you require any more proof, look no further than the opening of episode 3. This man's mind has concocted an elaborate dream scenario in which Penelope, unbound hair and intricate nightgown flowing, meets him under the moonlight, surrounded by extremely romantic scenery as he emerges from the mist to declare his love. The fact that his memory is recreating where they had their first kiss, then heightening the romance of it in every sense, is enough to convey this visually. If that wasn't enough, the content of what is said and how it's said, as he confesses his inability to sleep, eat, speak, this is quite literally romance novel 101. Even more telling is the fact that the entire narrative of the dream hinges on Penelope confessing and reciprocating those feelings. The conversation he has later on with his so-called friends at Will's club is another great, very direct example of this. His line,
But it is tiring, is it not? The necessity imposed on us to remain cavalier about the one thing in life that holds genuine meaning.
his delivery of
Do you not find it lonely?
is so masterful and conveys so much. This is the real Colin. This is how he's always felt and how he'll always feel. And he's just dripping with sincerity and earnestness in this scene. The entirety of episodes 3 and 4 is proof enough of not only how romantic Colin is as an individual, but how much of an effect the right circumstances have on him. He's in agony, in torture, he's jealous, he's staring shamelessly, he can't function properly in any sense of the word. He's watching them with literal tears in his eyes. He's lost all sense of propriety, if he ever had it to begin with, and approaches her in front of everyone, unafraid to cause whispers. He quite literally runs after her carriage on foot to catch up with her, and gets on his knees before her to confess his undying love. What could be more romantic? In part 2, Colin's romantic sensibilities are as obvious as ever, as the audience gets to actually see him in a relationship. As I've discussed in this video, characteristically, once Colin knows what he wants, he's not subtle in his approach. He wastes no time. He immediately proposes to Penelope, and then immediately brings her upstairs to tell his entire family. He's eager to announce this and is practically shouting it from the rooftops. Not even 24 hours after they're engaged, he's taking Penelope to their house where they're going to live their new life together. Also, according to Jess Brownell, Penelope gets pregnant after their first time. So zooming out and considering the sequence of events is really kind of insane. In the span of 24 hours, Penelope starts ready to accept a proposal from another man, only for that to be sabotaged by Colin. He then runs after her carriage, gets down on his knees, and confesses his love to her. They hook up in the carriage, they get engaged, they announce their engagement to the entire town and to their families. He takes Penelope away from her hostile situation, shows her their new home together, they have their first time together, and he gets her pregnant. All within a span of 24 hours. If this isn't evidence of his forthrightness and his romantic nature, I don't know what is. Colin also tallies up the most love declarations we've seen in the entirety of the Bridgerton universe.
I proposed to her out of love, because I love you. But I love her, Elle, in more ways than I can even express. Love has made me so simple, uncommonly lucky. You have never been in love. I love you.
Which again, I think makes sense given his romantic sensibilities. He's giddy and constantly discussing their future together.
This is to be our home, my bride-to-be. I look forward to our life together. Miss Featherington, for now, my only concern now is with her well-being and our future together. My future wife.
Despite being in an extremely precarious spot in their relationship, when Penelope declares her love to Colin's face, his reaction is very telling. It's almost like he can't resist it. He's too overcome by both the love he feels from her and for her. This is likely an unpopular opinion, but Colin's refusal to engage intimately with Penelope in the last 2 episodes, I view as a direct reflection of his romantic nature. To Colin, especially after having been with Penelope, love and sex are so inexorably intertwined. So as long as their relationship at large is uncertain and their communication is not at its best, he doesn't want to engage with her in that way. He wants for that to be a full expression of their love and unity. He's denying himself something he clearly wants and is more than entitled to preserve the sanctity of it. I also find Colin's decision to sleep on the couch right outside their bedroom extremely interesting because it's very likely that they have multiple bedrooms and multiple places in which he could sleep throughout this house. But there's still a part of him that wants to be close to her, that wants to protect her, that can't leave her. Longing for Penelope after she leaves in episode 8, he goes back and rereads every single letter that she's ever sent him. The fact that he even kept these letters is in and of itself extremely indicative of how romantic he is. But him taking the time to go back and relive their entire relationship and reread every single word that Penelope has ever sent to him over the span of years is extremely romantic. The next quality of Colin's that I want to touch on is his youth, and consequently his naivete and immaturity. Colin is one of the first 2 Bridgertons we ever see on screen alongside Benedict, and this scene establishes the family dynamic as well as Colin's place within it. It's obvious both visually and contextually that he's an older sibling, though not the oldest. Technically, Colin is the 3rd oldest sibling, but having Daphne be the oldest woman in the family sets him behind a little bit in terms of maturity and development, which leaves him quite firmly smack dab in the middle of the family. The family scenes also make it obvious that Colin has a good connection with both his younger and his older siblings. Along with his youth comes the characterization of him being the lighthearted one of the bunch. His persona, both within his family and the town at large, is the cheeky, charming, adventurous one.
How adventurous, Colin.
He's always the sibling that's darting a cheeky grin back and forth. He's the one cracking jokes.
We were just heading off to take our sticks out.
Colin Bridgerton.
A round of fencing. You have not seen my sister Daphne's embroidery. In all honesty, it is like a battlefield. Are there locusts in the street? Blood in the Thames. Are the end of days upon us already?
Oh, she sounds like a terrible nuisance. What a shame. You 2 better go fetch them.
She shall be the lady of the house and responsible for you all.
May the Lord help her. We shall gallop along.
Never taking himself too seriously.
I did not know you would be here.
Sorry to disappoint.
Is there something on my face? Has it been there all evening? It has, hasn't it?
Yet another very minuscule scene that I think is indicative of Colin's position within the family takes place at a park. It's a blink and you miss it moment, but there's a quick shot which shows Colin paired up with Antony, Gregory, and Hyacinth. Antony is very clearly inhabiting the role of father figure and patriarch here, which makes sense since he did effectively raise Gregory and Hyacinth. But Colin stands out in the scene because he doesn't exactly fit anywhere. It's obvious that he's older than his youngest siblings, but next to Antony, he still seems so young and childish. He's both too young and too old to fit neatly with either his younger or older siblings. There are multiple scenes throughout the show where Colin is paired with his youngest siblings, which I think just reiterates this point. In the infamous What a Barb scene, Colin's wit alongside his cheekiness are on display play here, it's clear he enjoys shocking people a little bit and catching them off guard. He's very playful. Toward the end of the scene, his lightheartedness and easygoing nature is actually remarked on.
My brother Colin certainly knows how to make things memorable.
He swiftly ushers Marina aside, makes a witty insult to the older lord pursuing her,
It seems to have manifested as a walking spittle factory with very large teeth.
and then both figuratively and literally spins her away.
They appear to be enjoying themselves.
There are multiple lines of dialogue when Colin's being talked about by other characters which reiterate and emphasize the fact that he's seen as very young.
Surely, though, Colin is a touch young for marriage.
That boy is barely out of leading strings. He has 2 older brothers and they're still running from the yoke.
Colin is young. Years from seriously thinking about marriage.
People automatically assume that he isn't serious in his courtship, because it's unusual for a man of his age, especially with the brothers that he has, to actually be seriously pursuing this. A subcategory of Colin's youth is his naivete, which is most acutely demonstrated in his interactions with Marina. When Marina first officially attempts to seduce Colin, he falls for it hook, line, and sinker. When she says,
Perhaps you know of a more private place where I might catch my breath?
Certainly, Miss Thompson.
he's genuinely concerned for her well-being. There's no part of him which considers that this might be an attempt to get them alone together. Once they are alone together, Marina says,
Though it is still quite loud.
knowing that Colin, caring, respectful, and naive as he is, will do anything to assuage her discomfort with little to no thought about the implications of closing the door behind them. He's the one to pull back and resist the temptation.
You are a lady, and I must maintain your honor and mine.
Regardless, this interaction still results in what Marina wanted in the first place. Colin proposes, completely oblivious to the fact that this was all a ploy to engender this exact response from him. The next scene where Colin's naivete is on full display is in his conversation with Antony after he announces his engagement to Marina. The sharp contrast of delivery from Johnny Bailey and Luke Newton emphasizes their sizable age and maturity difference. The lines themselves also directly address this disparity.
I know you were still rather green. I should have taken you to brothels when you returned home from Eton, whetting your wit, sowing your wild oats. You were still a child, Colin.
This last line epitomizes many of the points I've made up until this point, with Colin being viewed as a child. He is seen as younger than Daphne, despite him being technically older.
I'm older than Daphne, and you were happy to marry her.
It is not the same, and you know it.
I know nothing of the sort.
Then you betray your immaturity!
And his youth and immaturity leaves him prey to being taken advantage of, which everyone can see but him. There's a lot to dissect with this scene, but everything that Marina says in this conversation is extremely calculated. It's said with a specific intent to elicit a particular response, and Colin plays right into her hand.
I wish we could be married this very minute. I would never have to leave your arms.
What if I told you there was a way?
Colin, what?
Scotland.
She's gently guiding him in the direction of suggesting Gretna Green, only to act completely clueless when he mentions it, making him think it was his idea all along. Even after Marina's pregnancy is exposed, Colin is stubborn and maintains that these must be lies.
Miss Thompson must be in agonies over these lies. Why can I not visit her?
He behaves as though he genuinely doesn't understand why he shouldn't visit Marina, and his impudence literally forces Antony to explain it to him as though he's a child.
But if you were to go near her, then they will presume you're responsible for her ruin, and all your sisters will pay the price for your notoriety. Is this what you desire?
Well, of course not.
He feels frustrated that people in the family are taking the reins to mitigate the scandal with little to no consideration for what Colin wants and thinks. And he says,
I'm so very glad this has all been settled on my behalf.
indicating his frustration with being treated like a child. Of course, this treatment is proven to be correct, which is yet another blow to Colin's self-esteem. Later in his conversation with Daphne, he says,
I know you must think me a fool.
This is the first of many times that Colin uses the word fool to describe himself, but particularly in reference to how other people perceive him. In his ultimate confrontation with Marina, I really love his line delivery with,
You said you loved me.
because it conveys so keenly so many of these qualities. His immaturity, his naivete, his optimism, his romantic nature. It so epitomizes all the qualities which allowed him to be duped this way in the first place. Yet again, at the end of the season 1 finale, he refers to himself preemptively as a fool,
And I was a fool.
You are not a fool.
showing his awareness of the general perception of him, as well as his deep shame at having technically proven the perceptions of him as young, immature, naive correct, when he so desperately wants to be seen as anything but. The next time this is more explicitly referenced is when he goes to visit Marina in season 2, a majority of the subject matter coming from direct dialogue.
That is a fool's form of torture. You are a boy, caught up in his own fantasies.
Perhaps I have been a fool.
The general behavior of Colin in reference to Marina in season 2 is also a good indication of these hangups that he has. He's lacking the maturity and foresight necessary to move on from these issues. Despite the fact that these things are very clearly laid out in front of him, he remains stubborn and steadfast, beating a dead horse with little to no concept of how ridiculous he's being.
So you choose to be unhappy?
We are not all guaranteed a fairy tale ending. That dream has long since passed.
Marina.
You need to wake up, Colin.
Him visiting Marina in the first place, accepting the invitation to stay despite Marina's obvious discomfort, attempt to dig up the past and pass judgment on Marina's current situation, his continual inability to refer to her by her proper title.
Miss Thompson?
And Lady Crane, rather.
Marina. Miss Thompson. Lady Crane. Marina, I thank you for your time. Lady Crane. Goodbye. Marina.
Colin's youth and naivete doesn't play as big of a part in season 3 because he's matured and grown up a lot, but I do think that his reaction to finding out Penelope is Lady Whistledown is reminiscent of this issue. Likely a lot of people will be confused or put off by Colin's reaction to this, but I think it makes a lot of sense. This is a trauma response through and through. After finally feeling safe and secure in a relationship for the first time in his life, he's found himself in what feels like an identical situation to Marina where he's being duped and deceived. And yet again, he's forced to relive these negative emotions and experiences of feeling like a fool, feeling embarrassed, feeling humiliated. When you think about his history of being repeatedly deceived and feeling like a fool as a result, this makes a lot of sense. This is also the one descriptor that he's tried so hard to escape from. He doesn't like being perceived this way. He's ashamed of it. This is something that he thought he had finally grown out of, and yet here it is again coming back to bite him. The next element of Colin, which I find to be personally the most interesting, is the mistreatment from others and the insecurity that comes as a result of it. I really only picked up on this when I was working on my Colin relationship analysis, and the gist of it is that no one takes Colin seriously. There are so many instances of him being dismissed or underestimated, which lend themselves directly into the insecurity that he exhibits throughout the series. One of the physical qualities I've noticed while preparing for this video is the choice that Luke Newton makes to have Colin fidget his hands. He does this often, and it's always indicative of an insecurity or a lack of confidence in himself and his actions, which is a really nice touch. In the aftermath of his engagement announcement, he feels affronted that his family is so surprised at the fact that he's engaged. He defends himself by saying,
I have been courting Miss Thompson all season.
This perception of him is reaffirmed as Violet says that he's always flirted, but it's never been serious. Colin has to interject to say,
Until now.
Violet says that she's never seen him so solemn and serious, yet again nodding to his role as the lighthearted one. He makes a very telling statement, which I view as a cornerstone for his character, when he says,
No one ever takes me seriously, except Marina.
Because it shows how desperately he longs to be taken seriously, and partially explains his eagerness to pursue Marina, as she's the first person who's given him a taste of that feeling. He doesn't appreciate the perception that he's all fun and games, charming, cheeky, lighthearted, and he longs for someone to see him as something else, something more, which, as evident by their shock at his engagement, nobody else in his life does. In episode 1 of season 2, Penn mentions writing letters to Colin, to which Eloise replies,
In fairness, I've stopped reading his letters. He rambles, does he not?
While this does very subtly foreshadow Colin being a writer, what it more explicitly addresses is the fact that even those closest to him, his own family, do not take him seriously, and they don't put much effort into engaging with him in this way. This isn't to say that they don't love him or treat him well generally, but there is a lack of reverence or respect devoted to him by his family and subsequently by himself. This is only further confirmed by the "he looks distinguished" comment, which I talked about in my Colin relationship analysis, but here we have his family, ribbing him, making fun of his new look, his tan, his facial hair as he returns back from his travels.
This strange fuzzy growth on your chin is no doubt some kind of disease.
And you seem to have taken to the sun too. How peculiar.
And Penn takes a moment to say,
I think he looks distinguished.
I'm not.
which again is such an interesting word choice, distinguished, to describe him, because that's what he wants. It ascribes an importance to him and to his character that he's lacking sorely and wants desperately that nobody else is giving to him. Later in the same episode, Colin reveals that Penn is the person who
Read and replied to more of my letters than anyone else.
The idea that Colin missed his family so much and went to all this effort to keep them informed of his travels and whereabouts, only for that same effort to not be returned, is somewhat heartbreaking. At the end of the scene, though it's said in a joking sibling way, Eloise says,
You've been back a matter of hours, yet you're already on my way.
and Colin replies,
How I've missed you too, Elle.
which is obviously said somewhat sarcastically in jest, but there is a genuine sense of sadness underneath the statement, which I think might be more representative of his true feelings about this dynamic. Colin's deep insecurity is referenced directly when he's discussing that his confidence was boosted by Penelope.
I thought, if Penelope can see me this way, then surely I can too.
In episode 3, there are multiple seemingly harmless but ultimately malignant offhand comments made insulting or belittling Colin. The first happens when Eloise says,
Perhaps Uncle Colin will lull you to sleep with his many, many tales from his travels.
and later, in reference to his travels, she says,
He will be as insufferable now as you. If I must hear one more tale of your extraordinary adventures from Greece.
Of course, course, these are typical sibling jabs you might come to expect, and they're more insulting a behavior of Colin rather than his person as a whole. But Colin's biggest ambition has always been to travel, which they stated directly in the show with multiple lines of dialogue.
It has long been Colin's greatest ambition to travel the world.
They've made a point to emphasize how important this is to Colin and how integral it's been to his character from a very young age. The insinuation time and time again that him sharing that with his family is annoying, insufferable, boring, or a burden is bound to do some damage to him, and we see that reflected directly in his behavior in Season 3, Episode 1. We also see more immediate evidence of this insecurity that seeped in as a result of these insults, because in the next episode, in the midst of exuberantly recounting his travels to Marina, he becomes withdrawn and insecure, putting himself down by insulting his own remarks.
It sounds like a remarkable journey.
Remarkable, yes. In that I seem to have many remarks about it, do I not?
The assumption that no one wants to hear what he has to say already is taking root in his mind and affecting the way he interacts with other people. In episode 6, this pattern directly continues as Colin begins to be animated in discussing his thoughts and feelings with Penn, and Eloise says,
"Do not indulge him. He's been insufferable ever since returning from Greece."
Interacting with Colin in a meaningful or intellectually stimulating way is considered an indulgence in his family. It's a chore or an annoyance. It's not something that anybody would do willingly. It seems to me that his search for purpose and his insecurity are very wrapped up in one another. It seems like he feels the necessity to search for a purpose or a meaning because he feels like he needs to be useful in order to be deserving of love. Which is yet another reason why I think he's oblivious to the fact that Penn has always loved him. He doesn't feel like he's earned it or he's done anything to deserve it, so he doesn't see it when it's right in front of him. He has such a proclivity to assume the worst.
I know you must think me a fool. And I was a fool.
Perhaps I have been a fool.
When it's said that Penelope cares about him, one, he's shocked in the first place.
Penelope?
And two, the way that he interprets the statement, Penelope cares for you, is that she would never forsake me.
That you would never forsake me.
This is such an interesting way to interpret that statement, because to him, he's already assuming that someone is going to leave him, going to forsake him. He's already thinking of this love and adoration as something that's conditional, that needs to be earned, or that can be taken away. He also says in Season 2,
I'm beginning to believe that now.
which is a really sad thing that it takes him so long to believe that someone cares about him as much as Penelope does. In search for his purpose, when he ventures into investing, he's already aware of the way that his family will react and preemptively tries to ensure that neither Eloise nor Antony find out about it because he knows how they'll treat him.
I do not wish for words to get back to Antony.
And he's only proven right the next episode.
Colin, would you care to inform me about anything?
Now, it's important to note that people's responses to his engagement to Marina and then his attempt to venture into investing with the Ruby scheme, they're correct to be skeptical. But it is still really harmful to have the people that you love most and that are closest to you consistently underestimate you, not believe in you, and predict the worst, especially if it turns out to be that way. Colin's deep depression and existential crisis throughout all of Season 2 really reflects this.
Questions that seem to linger, no matter how far you go to escape them.
Are you quite well, brother?
As for Season 3, we also see a marked difference in Colin's behavior as when he's asked about his travels, he refuses to elaborate and says,
Try not to bore you with details.
Obviously having taken some of those comments last year to heart. His brothers jab him by saying,
When you returned last season, we'd heard all about your toil across the Mediterranean Sea by the time we broke our first fast.
Indeed.
Which, though said lovingly, contains a somewhat negative connotation, which I think only reaffirms his choice to change and act like a different person so that he might be better received. They acknowledge this as well when they say,
Who are you? What have you done with our brother?
Didn't I tell you this? About my tour? I'm to begin in Greece. Worldly travellers use it as a way to open their minds and transcend ordinary anxiety. It was a revelation, really. Made all the better by the knowledge that I may have been the only Briton to see it in decades. And continued along with them to Marousi and Harkis. That is after a quick swim in the Petali Gulf.
Try not to bore you with details.
There's so many comments, particularly in this first episode, about the way that Colin is acting different or unlike himself.
Is that our brother?
Colin? Since when are you one who simply glides in? Or is this truly the new you?
A new personality entirely.
Yet, we're seeing at every turn that he's being met with external praise and validation as a result. Colin came to the conclusion that who and how he wasn't enough and wasn't liked, and so he needed to change, and unfortunately, once he returns, those suspicions are only seemingly confirmed based on everyone's reaction.
I must say, Bridgerton, you are much more fun this season.
Yet again, we see the facade slip as Eloise calls him out and accurately pinpoints what it is that he's doing.
So I've joined the winning side. Not unlike you, I take it.
He tries to be suave and mysterious, but falters with Eloise.
A man cannot tell his secrets.
He's really disturbed when Eloise talks about loneliness.
Must be lonely.
The way that the camera holds on him and the subtle change in his expression communicates that deep down, he's extremely lonely. In his conversation with Penn at the end of episode 1, his self-reflection about these tendencies is on display when he says,
"There is nothing more I want than to earn back the favor of the one person who has always truly made me feel appreciated."
Showing that he has come to the realization that the one and only person in his life who truly appreciates or sees him is Penn. In episode 2, his insecurity is clear as he's nervous and apprehensive about whether or not Penn will want to be seen with him following what she wrote about him.
You saying you want my help after what Lady Whistledown wrote?
Later in this episode, Colin goes on a diatribe about the things he's discovered while abroad.
Before we started caring what others think, I was entirely freed of being the Colin Bridgerton that Tom knows me to be, which is how I became myself. Penn, living for the estimation of others is a trap.
And it will be finding that comfort in yourself that will get you there.
Which is exceedingly ironic given the fact that this whole persona is him doing the exact opposite of everything that he's just told Penn to do. Though he is able to give sound advice, he's yet to be able to actually take it himself. When he catches Penn reading his journal, what he's most angry about stems from deep insecurity. He says,
"Whatever you read was not meant for another's eye,"
which is the source of the majority of his frustration. Once she compliments and reaffirms the quality of his writing, he has a sense of comfort that was not there prior, showing that it was rooted in his insecurity about his ability as a writer, rather than anything else. Post-kiss, his confidence and bravado has gone entirely out the window with a single peck from Penn. The truth and intimacy of that interaction has disarmed him of all of his defenses. I think the fact that he's entirely clueless about Penn's feelings for him, which is affirmed by the conversation he has with Violet when he says,
"How did you and Father know it was reciprocated?"
is a very telling detail. Despite how obvious it might have been to the audience that Penelope felt this way, I don't know that he thinks he deserves or has earned the type of love that Penn has had for him all along. Toward the end of part 1, once he does start to embrace himself and his true desires and feelings, he's shunned. His friends laugh at him and look down at him. Lastly, in the carriage, his speech pretty much confirms everything that I've just said.
"I have spent so long trying to feel less, trying to be the kind of man society expects me to be."
Post-engagement, we see a real resurgence of Colin's insecurity. Yet again, he's consistently assuming the worst. He questions Penn many times about whether his feelings are even reciprocated. He has a sense of foreboding and anxiety when it comes to the engagement. He's always thinking she's about to call it off.
I know it does not look like much now, but are you concerned that we should not be here alone? I would understand if you got swept up in the carriage, if you do not now share my feeling.
It's really sad to see that even after everything, even after all the love that Penn has shown him, he still has a hard time believing that it's real or that it'll stay. I think his understanding of worth comes back up here because he still feels like he hasn't done anything to deserve this love, so he questions the validity of it. He's constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop.
We shall officially be married, if you will still have me.
I also think that Colin's reaction to praise is very telling because he has his own insecurities and his own issues, which directly translate into his need for validation. And when he gets genuine praise, the difference is remarkable.
Well, would you want to marry me, Miss Thompson?
I would be delighted to marry you.
We will marry by the end of the season. You hate the idea?
I love it. I love you.
Allow me a day.
I like your remarks, Colin.
You're astonishing, Colin. Yet somehow they shine even brighter when you are kind. Your writing is very good. But you truly write so well. You make it seem effortless, which is so difficult to do. I'd very much like to read more one day. Colin, we are friends.
Yes, baby.
I'd very much like to be more than friends.
You see the way that he lights up. You see how badly he wants and needs this. Colin's issues of deep insecurity are also roused yet again by the Lady Whistledown reveal. Not only does he feel foolish and stupid and naive, but now he has to contend with the fact that he's questioning his ability as a writer, especially in comparison to Penelope.
Do you know what is most humiliating? I let you talk so much about my journal as if I were to be this great writer.
There is an element of envy there, which they directly address in the dialogue.
Do not sound as if you hate Whistledown. You sound as if you are jealous of her.
No, I'm not. I've been envious of you.
But more so even than envy, he just feels inadequate and inferior, which is something that he's had to deal with his entire life. The perception of himself that he was starting to become acquainted with based on these affirmations and compliments is now being called into question. Everything he thought he knew is now uncertain, so he can't be sure that her praise was real.
You have been a published writer, renowned across Mayfair.
I meant everything I said about your writing.
And he reverts back to a place of deep self-doubt where, again, he's assuming the worst. He's basically thinking she's been laughing at me this entire time. The next quality of Colin's that I want to discuss is him being empathetic, kind, and sensitive. These characteristics also lend themselves directly into his hero complex, his close relationship with his mother, and his tendency to people please. The first time that this quality is really emphasized is at the end of episode 1 in the incident with Cressida. Simply put, the entire narrative purpose of this scene is to show the audience that Colin is a sweet, kind guy. He's observant and he looks out for people. It's not in his nature to behave in a mean-spirited way, and he doesn't tolerate people who do. He's shown to be extremely sweet and caring and affectionate at Aubrey Hall as an uncle. The way he interacts with Marina's baby, yet again, is very sweet. The fact that he got really thoughtful presents for every single member of his family and is ecstatic to give it to them and watch their reactions. The amount of thought and time that he put into making sure that each of those gifts specifically corresponded to the person he was giving it to. He's very thoughtful. Even if you weren't able to discern this just by observing him, it's made clear by the other characters in the way that they describe him.
He is kind and funny and a surprisingly accomplished dancer. He will be a wonderful father.
You're a good man.
He is a good man with a good heart.
Rather considerate. Gallant, even.
It is the mark of a good man to help a friend.
Always aware of what others need, always trying to be helpful or offering a joke to lighten the mood.
Kind and feeling, occasionally excitable, good-hearted man. You're a very good man, Mr. Bridgerton.
Colin's tendency to people please throughout the series is evident, and it's even directly acknowledged by Violet in Season 3. One of the most illuminating scenes in Season 3 is the conversation that Violet and Colin have in Episode 4. The way that both Violet and Mrs. Wilson approach him and look at him in this instance is so fascinating. They both seem to have this maternal inclination toward Colin and a deep understanding of who he is at his core, which is why they can see through this facade so clearly. They're both taken aback by his outburst because it's so uncharacteristic of Colin. Even still, despite Colin's annoyance in this moment, he can't even finish his outburst. He realizes halfway through what he's doing and starts to tamp himself down.
Last night?
I am, well.
Luke Newton's performance in the scene is really good. He manages to physically make Colin look so young in this moment. He looks like a scared, lost boy. His physical performance really indicates the emotional terrain that Colin is covering. He can't make eye contact, he's shifting back and forth, he's fidgeting with his hands, he's clenching his jaw, he's ashamed. He's extremely uncomfortable with what just transpired.
My head is bottle weary. Forgive me for lashing out.
Violet saying that Colin is one of her most sensitive children is absolutely an apt descriptor, especially when you think about him comparatively speaking to the rest of the siblings. She goes on to say that he so rarely puts himself first, which has been highly contested by the audience, but I think a lot of people are misinterpreting what it is that she's saying. Honestly, from a writing perspective, they probably should have rephrased this sentence because they had used that exact descriptor in reference to Kate and Antony so often in Season 2. And it makes sense for them. They're parentified, they're the heads of the household. They're sacrificing themselves and their lives and their happiness to take care of everybody else. And that doesn't apply to Colin. Essentially, what I think she means when she says this is that Colin is a people pleaser. He prioritizes what other people need or want before what he needs or wants. In the scene where he rejects Marina, he's immediately worried that he's offended her.
Have I offended you?
He's dipping his eyes to try and discern her emotions. He's panicking, pulling out a proposal at the last minute in attempts to rectify the situation. He can't tolerate the idea that he might have offended or hurt her, and he does everything he possibly can to make up for it. We see how badly he wants the approval of both Violet and Antony during his engagement, and he works hard to try and get it.
But I would very much prefer to have your blessing.
His entire mission to try and fit in better with the Ton is indicative of his need and his desire to please those around him. Colin is shown to be extremely attuned to other people's emotions countless times.
Is anything wrong?
Whether it's within his family, his siblings.
Did something happen? Sister, back at Cliveden.
Your head is clearly elsewhere, brother.
I will admit my thoughts are far from the field.
Something troubling you?
Well...
With Pen.
Should we dance?
No, all danced out for the night. Colin.
Does something trouble you? Something wrong?
Pen, between us, I mean. Is everything all right?
I know. Something is bothering you. I can feel it. All evening you've been shirking my gaze.
This is likely a detail most people missed, but I love this moment. In the Pall Mall scene, Colin clocks onto the fact that Edwina is in distress when she's leaving the game, and nods to Antony to indicate that he should go after her and comfort her. So even within a large group, or in reference to strangers, Colin is very attuned to these emotions and willing to offer help at every turn. He apologizes for the mistakes that he made to Will, and he brings people into his place of business.
I'm in your debt now, Mr. Mondridge.
He's consistently asking Penelope about her thoughts, her feelings, her emotions.
Why is it you want a husband? What is the one thing in the world that makes you feel most comfortable now? Do you like him?
Do you feel some attachment to him?
I also find it interesting to note that pretty much any time that Colin expresses anger, he's in tears. He's sensitive. At his core, the main emotion is hurt. His expression of his angst and anguish is also very contemplative and moody. He's far more internal than he is external in expressing these difficult emotions. He broods off into the distance, he revisits his journals, he reminisces on memories with Penelope through touching his injured hand. The way that we see Colin express himself in his intimate encounters with Penelope is crucial in tying all these threads together, and in my opinion is some of the most impressive work that Luke Newton does this entire season. He's extremely attuned to Penelope's emotions during these encounters. He's actively cognizant of her experience. He's watching her, he's paying attention, he's inquiring after her, he's communicating with her. He cares just as much, if not more, about her experience than his own. The facial acting in particular that Luke Newton does throughout these scenes is quite honestly very impressive. His facial expressions are so expertly intertwined with the emotions and the journey of the character. There's no vanity in this performance, which ironically is what makes it so sexy. You can see Colin's desperation for intimacy and connection throughout these scenes. He often looks as if he's in disbelief that this is actually happening, that he's actually getting what he's always wanted. During intimate encounters, a trademark facial expression of his is to furrow his brows, which again is indicative of his disbelief, of his wonder, of his awe at what's happening. The first time that we see this expression is during his first kiss with Penelope, which makes sense. There's a total shock and ultimate humility in it. He's overwhelmed and overcome by the situation. He's confused, confounded, and even a little bit grief-stricken at the fact that what he's always been searching for has been right in front of him this entire time. And you see him make that realization in real time. He constantly looks as if he's questioning, how did this happen? How did I miss this? Has this always been there? How did I not see it earlier? The expression that he makes during the carriage scene when Penelope is touching his face and hair is somewhat difficult to describe, but still universally understood. There's something very visceral and vulnerable about that look. Put simply, it feels extremely real. But it also makes a lot of sense narratively for the character. At this point, Colin's been dreaming of Penelope. He can't believe that this is actually happening, and her touch reassures him that it is real, that it's not a dream. And not only that, but there's also such a relief. He's been searching for this exact type of connection and feeling, and finally, his cup is being filled. He's not hollow or empty anymore. He's getting what he needs and what he wants. Hence, the disbelief morphing into the biggest grin you've ever seen in your life. There's something almost startling and uncomfortable about the truth of it. It's also important to note that his satisfaction and fulfillment is now cerebral and spiritual as well as physical, and you can see that embodied in him. During their first time together, there are many instances in which it feels and looks as if this is a first for Colin, which yet again makes a lot of narrative sense. This is the first time that he's had this connection and this intimacy. He may be physically experienced, but this is new. And you can see that type of satisfaction and fulfillment clear as day on his face. You can see how connected he is to her in these moments, how into this moment he is, which not only mirrors the character's emotional arc, but lends authenticity to these scenes. One of Colin's defining characteristics that appears multiple times throughout the show is his hero complex. And given his characterization, this being a recurring pattern for Colin makes a lot of sense. All the qualities that I've outlined here, his empathy, his sensitivity, his deep insecurity, his feelings of inferiority, his search for purpose, his desire to be taken seriously, his belief that he needs to do something to earn love, his romantic outlook on life, they all lend themselves to this exact type of dynamic. The first time that we really see this portrayed on screen is at the end of episode 1 when he rescues Penn from Cressida.
I'm afraid I cannot offer you that dance, Miss Cowper. I am to escort Miss Featherington to the floor.
His entire relationship with Marina could be accurately described as a manifestation of his hero complex. They even explicitly use this verbiage in the show. There are multiple times where Marina, in reference to her relationship with Colin, uses this language of being rescued or saved.
Did you see the way he rescued me tonight?
I once thought that would be enough to save me from my reality. I do not need saving in that way.
And he does rescue her, time and time again. His initial pursuit of her in the first place plucks her from obscurity.
I'm sure I've never seen her.
One of the Bridgerton boys is joining the swarm.
I imagine your household will be a hive of callers in the morning.
Where one suitor goes, the rest will surely follow.
He then goes on to literally sweep her off her feet, rescuing her from her older suitors. Marina's really good at playing into this dynamic of rescuer and rescuee. At Daphne's wedding, she feigns illness and irritation, propelling Colin into action in order to save her. The whole setup that Marina gives to Colin in this scene,
I cannot stand it, Colin.
About nobody wanting her,
My own father does not want me.
people always rejecting her,
Even the Featheringtons cannot wait to be rid of me.
her not having a home, wanting to be accepted.
I truly thought that with your family I might finally find acceptance.
Of course incites him to rebuke that notion.
That is not true. Marina.
She's able to victimize herself so efficiently in Colin's eyes that he is immediately taking action to prove her wrong, to remedy this and rescue her from it. He can't tolerate this idea of not rescuing her. He does this with his proposal and then subsequently when he mentions Gretna Green.
What if I told you there was a way?
Colin's entire infatuation with Marina has a lot less to do with her and a lot more to do with the idea of her and the life they could lead that he's built up in his head. As he said, Marina's the first person to give him a glimpse of what it might feel like for someone to really take him seriously. He likes to feel that he has a purpose, that he's useful and important, that he makes a difference in somebody's life. He has a romanticized notion of this life that they're going to lead together and their partnership and their marriage and their family that they make together really actually fulfilling this purpose that he's been looking for. When he stands up to Antony by saying,
"Enough! You insult me and you insult my intended."
He views this as him stepping up as a protector and a provider, him defending his family. Even flashing forward to season 2, his entire visit to Marina is completely fueled by this complex. He wants to make sure that she's alright. He has this fantasy of coming in and rescuing her from this terrible situation, and she even says deliberately and explicitly that she doesn't need rescuing in that way. That protective instinct is there with Penn as well, and we see this a lot as he defends her and her family time and time again.
You can leave them out of it. The Featheringtons are a fine family, whose reputation has been most unfairly traduced.
The entire subplot of the Rubies in season 2 is inspired 1 by his search for purpose, and fulfilled 2 by his hero complex. He likes the idea of protecting and serving and defending this family and this person that he's known for so long, especially since there isn't a man already there to do it.
How dare you take advantage of these poor ladies, Featherington, without a father or a husband to protect them?
Who should help her? She does not have any male relatives.
We see some of the most overt examples of his hero complex in season 3. From running after Penn to check that she's okay at pretty much every social function, to offering to help her find a husband in the first place. Perhaps the most universally recognizable sign of this is in the scene with the hot air balloon. If the heroic zoom-ins on Colin and the rousing music wasn't enough to alert you to this, they say it explicitly many times within the show.
Is everyone?
I am in awe of your heroism.
But at the center of this heroic deed is his protection of Penn. The reason why he even goes after the air balloon in the first place is because he sees that Penn is in potential danger. Even his highly inappropriate interference in her courtship with Devling can be seen as a heroic act, as he's saving her from a loveless marriage, which he knows she doesn't want. In part 2, we see him defend and protect her often, whether it's toward Eloise,
And I am deeply sorry, but I love her.
his brothers,
My feelings for Penelope are not a thunderbolt from the sky.
or even her own mother.
I am still speaking. Penelope is the most eligible amongst you.
This is a big moment for Colin, where he gets an opportunity to protect and defend Penelope loudly and proudly, and he's able to usher her away from this hostile situation.
I will always look after you, Penelope. I will always stand up for you.
Even when he's angry at Penelope, he can't help but protect and defend her.
And I will not stand for anyone blackmailing my wife. I take it your mother does not know about your blackmailing my wife?
Of course, he ends up making the situation worse, but the point is that he wants to help. He feels the necessity to help.
I will not let her ruin our night.
He gets frustrated when Penelope denies his help.
It is not up to you what we do. Then how am I meant to help you?
He feels useless and powerless and worthless if he can't protect her.
Then what good am I to you?
She's, of course, the person that needs to teach him that he doesn't need to protect her in order for him to be worthy of love.
It is not what you do for me that makes me love you. I do not need you to save me. I just need you to stand by me.
The next thing I want to discuss is Colin's complicated relationship to society and his position within society. The best way to really observe this is to look at his Season 3 persona in comparison to the way that he behaved in Seasons 1 and 2. In contrast to his brothers, he's an active participant. He's participating in courting and social customs, dances. As an obviously well-liked member of society, he has a comfort and ease as he moves about these events. Due to him being more of an active participant, he has a better finger on the pulse of society and the social dynamics at play. We see this in his interaction with Cressida, as he's able to navigate both the flirtation and polite rapport he has at the beginning of the conversation, only for him to later shun Cressida based on her interaction with Penelope, but he does so in a socially acceptable, polite way. His grasp on the social hierarchy allows him to understand the gravity of Daphne's statement when she says that Cressida witnessed her and Simon. He's essentially a paragon of society, but there are many ways in which his natural inclinations go against the societal norms. We see Colin repeatedly do commentary on the ridiculousness of some of the people within society.
Most wretched sonnet indeed.
Our host looks a bit fussy. Do you think if he goes to bed, we all have to leave? It's lucky the lady produced an heir before the old earl croaked, no? Walking spittle factory with very large teeth. Am I the only one who can see it?
But the further I get from that pianoforte, the more like a party it feels.
He's unusually observant in that way. We also see him being generally more upfront and forthright than the average person within this society. He doesn't beat around the bush or talk in codes. He goes after what he wants. You see this in him courting Marina.
Mr. Colin Bridgerton shall be awarded the year's grand prize.
Have you seen Miss Thompson?
I have been trying to get in front of Miss Thompson all night. I bring you flowers on each of my visits. Then marry me. We would be married. We would be together. I shall arrange everything.
He was content to directly address Eloise's question when she asked about sex.
Do not look at me. Have you ever visited a farm? No.
When he senses that him and Penelope are being discussed, he walks straight up to people and asks them the direct question.
Pardon me, what are you whispering about?
We also see him being impervious and sometimes downright hostile toward propriety as a concept. He turns down dances, he gossips in the corner, he insults people. He has entirely unchaperoned interactions with Pen time and time again. He takes Pen's hand in front of everybody in a crowded ballroom and escorts her to a separate location, after which he closes the door behind them. He's writing to an unmarried woman who's not a member of his family. He's unafraid to discuss innuendo or inappropriate topics. He has a well-documented pattern of improper behavior. All of this can be attributed to him just being generally more expressive. He's less repressed than a lot of the other men within society. The ways that Colin doesn't fit the convention of what's expected for a man within society is no more obvious than at the beginning of Season 3, as we see him try, and ultimately fail, to live up to these ideals. As we see with Simon, Antony, and Benedict, it's expected for men around that age to shun society and avoid courtship, at least for a while. There's an expectation for these men to, as Antony said, sow their wild oats. Most all of them fit the archetype of rake. They go to brothels, they engage in meaningless flirtation, they have mistresses on the side. None of them have serious intentions of getting married, and even Violet in Season 1 says,
All men make that assertion. Your father. I fully subscribe to the belief that reformed rakes make the very best of us.
You will not make her happy.
So it's expected of these men to avoid the marriage mart, to not involve themselves in any way in which they could be trapped into marriage. Colin defied these conventions by pursuing courtship despite his young age, proposing to Marina, and never engaging in flirtation or sexual encounters that wouldn't lead to something serious. Colin wouldn't even engage in sexual encounters that would lead to something serious, as he refused to even kiss Marina. In Season 3, he's flirting with any and every woman in his line of sight, though it's important to note that he's not doing it in any meaningful way, and not in any way which leads them to believe that he's seriously pursuing them. In fact, he's actively voicing his intention to avoid marriage to these women that he's flirting with. Now we see him going to brothels regularly, bragging about his conquests overseas. But, as we all know, this is just an act, and he soon returns to himself with the help of Penelope. Also with the help of Penelope, he's able to fully accept himself by the end of the season. The conversation in which he says,
"We shall make our own family, you and me,"
is very telling to me. He's extremely young to be talking about making his own family with such certainty, but I interpret it as him seeing this relationship as a way to create purpose and meaning within his life. He adapts to the idea that his life might have true purpose if he was in charge of heading a family, of having people to take care of and be responsible for. Marina's ardent pursuit of and apparent need for Colin fulfills his deepest desire. The more that I think about Colin and put all these elements of his character in front of me, the more this makes sense. All these things directly transfer into one another. I still hold this belief that he will find his truest purpose and fulfillment in his relationship with Penelope and the family that they built together.
My only purpose in life is to love a woman as great as you. And I will be a very fulfilled man indeed.
His relationship with Penelope is not only able to fill this deepest desire, but also to assure him that he's worthy without having to do anything in the first place. It also inspires and encourages him to have his passion of writing, and we see that he's successful by the end of it. For Colin, the end of season 3 really is a fairy tale happily ever after. He's fulfilled in every single way that he ever wanted to be, all the ways that he didn't even know he needed to be, and he's learned to accept and love himself as he is. Let me know your thoughts on Colin as a character and this character analysis. I am going to do a Colin relationship analysis for season 3. That will be coming. Let me know any other character analysis or any other videos that you would like to see from me, and I will see you very soon for yet another video.